I know as a parent, you would probably tell me that you would do anything to keep your children safe. But sometimes what we say and what we do are two different things. Would you absolutely do everything in your control to keep your children physically safe, emotionally safe, and psychologically safe? And what do we do when there's things we can't control? The opinions of others, cultural differences, or physical safety? Do we live in fear, keeping our children in bubbles? Or do we start to dissect and investigate our own belief, our own biases, how we grew up, and what is inside of us? And that's why I'm having today's conversation with you. I'm really, really excited to introduce you to Trystan Reese. One day, I was on Instagram and I came across a picture of Trystan with a beautiful caption, and I am going to read it to you. You can find him at Biff and I on Instagram. BIFF and I. So BIFFANDI. Biff and I, Trystan Reese. Here it goes. I don't know how to tell women that I am not a threat to them, that my ability to give birth doesn't take away from their ability to give birth, that my encouragement of affirming birthing spaces is not an attack on their sacredness space, that I too am sacred, that I too am a giver of life, that my self-knowledge as a man does not take any of that and go away. How can I convince them? Because also I understand their skepticism towards me. After all, it is I who stormed out of the lady party years ago, vowing never to return. I shunned the feminine for so long, falling victim to the idea that there was only one way to be a man. And for that, I am truly sorry. Sexism poisoned me too, and I am still recovering. When I entered the birthing world, I initially tried to act as an uninvited guest might, treading lightly until I understood my place. What I found was a community of people who had built their entire identities around birthing person as women. If I am a woman because I can give birth, but now men can give birth too, then what does that make me? I cannot answer that question for you, because the ability to give birth should never have been the foundation of your identity to begin with. What about the choice not to birth? What about the inability to birth? What about this feminist idea that none of us is required to birth in order to secure our role as a valuable human? I try to be gracious, to understand that in many ways, I am still a guest here. This is a lady party, and I wasn't invited back in. But wherever I encounter defensiveness, I know there is a wound. We don't defend the parts of ourselves that have been healed. This is why I don't attack women who don't believe I should be at their party. It's not me they're mad at. It's not me who hurt them. It's sexism that forced them to seek refuge with women. And now I'm barking in like I have my own, And now I'm barging in like I own the place. When we are able to see sexism, not trans people, as the problem, that's when liberation will come. All right. I am super excited to introduce you to Trystan Reese. You have to go check him out on Instagram, Biff and I. And also go pre-order his book. So I'm going to read you his bio. Trystan Reese launched into the public eye as the pregnant man in 2017, when the story of his family's unique journey gained international media attention. He was invited to give a closing performance for the Moth main stage in Portland, Albuquerque, and Brooklyn. A video of the Brooklyn event went viral, gaining over 2.5 million views. And as interest in his family story grew, Trystan partnered with many major media outlets. He is an established thought leader, educator, speaker, focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. He is professionally trained as an anti-racism facilitator and has been organizing within the trans community for nearly 2 decades. The founder of his own consulting firm, Trystan provides customized training solutions for individuals, organizations, and communities. He's married to his partner, Biff, and they live in Portland with their 3 kids, Haley, Lucas, and Leo, and they are very happy. So the reason why I wanted to share Trystan's story with you is because when I was on Instagram and I saw the picture, it was actually of Trystan pregnant, and I read the caption, I just screamed in my body, yes, yes, yes. Because this is about so many things. This is truly about allowing ourselves to be seen, to be understood, and to be whoever the fuck we were born to be in the world. And also how our judgments literally stop people from becoming their best selves. And that's all we're doing. We are all on a journey walking ourselves home back. That's it. That's it. Who are you? How do you want to feel? And there's so much more work that we have to do as individuals to undo and unlearn. So, would you truly do anything to keep your children safe? Would you see and accept them for who they are? Would you do the inner work to unlearn your biases, your prejudice? Would you take a stand when maybe you don't even understand the other person's perspective? Are you willing to listen, truly listen instead of becoming defensive? Are you willing to heal? So let's dive into today's conversation. And I am so curious what you think. Send me a message. You can text me, 313-710-5199, or send me a DM on Instagram. All right, welcome, Trystan, to the podcast.
Oh my gosh, so excited to be with you.
Isn't it the beauty of technology when we use it in a productive way to make an impact in the world?
I know. Well, one of my favorite people that I actually met through social media is an author and a psychologist and works with families and kids. And she says, technology is great for learning and connecting. And so I feel like, hopefully you and I will both get to do that today, to use technology for its best purposes.
For sure. I'm just trying to change the view and it's working over here. There we go. Okay. So I found you on social media and I read a post when you were pregnant, and it started with, well, you wrote it and now it's not in front of me, so I don't know exactly what it said. But I was like, man, the world needs to hear from him, because this is an issue, and it's not just about, it's about equity, it's about inclusion, it's about all of that, but also being who you want to be in the world and feeling safe. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, and getting to understand people that maybe we don't understand, right? Like deep listening, radical listening, being curious rather than judgmental. So I wanted to give you the microphone today and just take it from there. So for people who don't know you, I know people probably ask you this all the time. It's really annoying. Who are you? Can you give me the nutshell version, like just a few minutes of who you are?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just a regular dude living in Portland, Oregon, with a house full of kids, animals, and now bugs. We've picked up the most bizarre pandemic hobby, which is raising praying mantises.
Oh, I was like, oh, are bugs just now entering your home and you're just
Oh,
starting
no,
to
no,
notice there?
no. Oh, my
That's
God.
interesting.
No, 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 no. They're in terrariums. They're in tiny terrariums, but just to paint a picture of what our house is like.
I love it.
But no, I assume what you want me to talk about, are a few things. One, I'm an adoptive parent. My partner and I became parents quite literally overnight to my partner's niece and nephew, his sister's kids, who were 1 and 3 at the time, and we have since adopted them. We're their forever family. We're we're their dads, and they're now 10 and 12. It makes you feel so old when I say that. And 3 years ago, well, maybe more like 4 years ago, I approached my partner and asked if he would be interested in making a baby with me. And for us, that's possible because I'm a transgender man. And so I was assigned female at birth. I was raised in a sort of, a typical, traditional, sort of seen by the world as, oops, you're going to want to edit that out, I assume. Let me turn off those notifications. I apologize. Thought I had done that. Apparently I did not.
I would get like text messages on my computer. And one time my son was like losing his mind about something. And I'm like, stop texting me. I'm doing an interview right now.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'll often have to like send a text to my partner downstairs to be like, I'm so sorry, but like maybe the screaming could go from like an 8 to like a 7.
Yeah.
I don't want to have too much. Okay. So, and then about 4 years ago, I really wanted to grow our family, and the process of becoming legal guardians and then adopting, our niece and nephew are awesome kids. I have no regrets. And it was a really, really stressful process, both for them and for us. There was a lot of trauma, a lot of chaos. And I sort of started thinking, what would it be like to grow our family on our own terms, less in a reactive, more in a proactive way. And so I approached my partner and I just asked, would you be interested in having a baby with me? And for us, what that meant is that I would literally be getting pregnant and carrying the child myself. So I'm a transgender man. I was assigned female at birth, raised as a girl in like a typical household. And in my late teens, really came to the realization that I was transgender, that I wanted to be living my life as a man, that I was a man. And so I transitioned. I didn't end up having any surgical procedures on my reproductive organs. And so, there's a lot of research out there to suggest and to tell us that, actually uteruses are really amazing. And testosterone doesn't impact the uterus or the eggs at all. And so I was able to go off of testosterone, regain my ovulatory cycle, and get pregnant and give birth to my own child. So we found a way of sort of hacking the system. They said 2 men can't make a baby. They were wrong. We can, and we did. And so now we have 3 kids, ages 3, 10, and 12. And I told my story publicly, which ended up sort of juxtaposing pretty well, because that's my background as well, as in storytelling, facilitating courageous conversations around really complicated topics where there might be bias, where there might be assumptions, where there might be some misinformation. So that ended up sort of catapulting me into the work that I do now, which is really helping people and communities and organizations do a better job of living in their integrity and creating welcoming environments for everyone.
I love that. So you have 3 children then in your home?
Yep, and we have a trans foster teen as well living with us. So right now we have 4 children under age 18 in our house.
Your smile is like 4 children.
I know you can't see it if someone's listening to a podcast, but yes. Yeah. And often there are more children around because that's the kind of house that we are.
But you know what? That brings me joy to say there's so many children around, because they feel safe probably in your home, and you've been able to create that safe container. And I grew up not really wanting to bring people home, and I love now when I have 3 boys, and just people are here all the time. So when you're organizing the chaos, especially during the whole pandemic, it's like, we get to do this. We created this. Like, there's so much love and possibility here, and chaos and challenge and all of that. So Trystan, I would love to know when I say what this journey has been like for you is an understatement. But if you were able, like being in front of a whole bunch of women who are challenged, with cisgendered women who are finding everyday challenges, maybe putting that into perspective for someone like yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the perspective thing, I think, is a complicated question, because I think what happens is we tend as humans to kind of compare our joys and our struggles to others. And we know through the tenets of Buddhism that all suffering comes from comparison, from wishing that things were different, or from looking at someone else and imagining that they have it easier. So I don't really know that there are adequate comparisons between the two. I think that there, were interesting moments of connection and transformation throughout my process, both becoming a parent for the first time and then going through a pregnancy as a man and in the public spotlight. And I'll say, often the question that I get is, how can I show up? How can I show up for trans people in the world? And I think allyship is so unique to every person, that we're all going to have different styles and different ways of doing it. But the story that comes to mind, I think, for your audience, and I'm not sure which post it is that you read, because I did write a lot during my pregnancy and afterwards.
I think it was the last. I think it was the most recent. It was a picture of you pregnant on the front porch, or a porch of some sort.
Yeah, talking about the birth world and not seeing a pregnant man as an intrusion into femininity and the sacred space of women. And I think one so potent example of when that didn't happen. I try to live in the realm of what to do and not what not to do. I'm specifically remembering, I was maybe midway through my pregnancy, so 5 or 6 months, just starting to really show. I was hoping, because I'm a little bit smaller, that maybe I would just have a little cute little tiny belly, that like a little Gigi Hadid belly or something, and then I could just put it under a sweater and no one would know. No, the opposite happened. But I was in line at the local coffee shop, and there's a very pregnant woman in front of me, and I was like, oh, that, it's so exciting. Like, are you expecting? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, when are you due? And she said, oh, I'm doing May. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. I'm doing July. Like, you're a couple months ahead of me. Like, are you all nesting or what? And we have this conversation about, she's like, oh my God, we're in such denial. We haven't even painted the room. I don't know what crib to buy. So we just have this like very mundane conversation about pregnancy and morning sickness and like partners being detached from the process, blah, blah, blah. And then, she gets her coffee and she leaves. And I'm like, well, good luck with everything. She leaves. And like, I am just like completely flummoxed and struck and stunned as she goes, because of the sheer normality of the conversation I just had. Like, she didn't even, at no point was she like, wait a second, you're pregnant? You're a man. How did that happen? Like, at no, it was like for 2 to 3 minutes, I fell through the looking glass into a world where all possibilities exist, where all decisions are honored as sacred and valid, and where human connection is like flows through us like air. And I just thought, oh, like, that's the world. That's the world that I'm trying to create, where two human beings can just have a mundane conversation about the like everyday realities of pregnancy and creating life in a world, in a culture, in a society, without having all the other stuff get in the way. And the other stuff gets in the way so much of the time that I think like, okay, when it does happen, it's important to sort of mark it and be like, this was really special, and how do we do more?
I love that. It's like when you have like a calm in the home, it's the beauty of contrast, right? Like, you're really just being able to experience that. that moment, and it's like, this is alignment. It's here. This is what I'm going, more of this, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. And it is the exception that makes the rule. And I think actually when I wrote about that, I think that was like the best performing post I did all year, because I don't think people understand why that was special to me, because of the armor that I've had to put on. And I don't think people see it, the fact that this is special and unique. It's kind of like if you could imagine walking down a street in New York City without being catcalled.
Yeah.
That would be like, oh my God, what is happening? This is amazing. A man, like 99.9% of men, have no idea that that's even happening. They don't see it. They don't notice it. And so if you were to say, oh my God, I didn't get catcalled today, they'd be like, what? Why does that matter? And so that's one of the lenses that you can kind of help people hone, is just that, like you said, curiosity and empathy. That was an extraordinary moment for me, because my whole life, that whole year basically was dealing with people asking me questions. How did this happen? Why did you decide to do this? What is this like? And then all the more insidious things. And so I just try to encourage people to think about how can you get to that place where you're able to just be open and not bring all the stuff,
So what's the opposite for you of how do you, like, can you share your own personal experience of how did you get to that point of curiosity, right, in other areas of your life? Because sometimes there's trauma as humans, and then we're building that armor and we can't see through it. And when someone says, just be curious, be open. But when you're in an environment that isn't curious or open, and where do you start? Where do you begin?
Yeah. And I think this does probably get to, what you read from me, which is really about helping people cultivate humility. This is like a whole training that I do, because I think the opposite of defensiveness, the opposite of fragility, is being humble. Seeing yourself as a lifelong learner, seeing yourself as on a journey. I'm a big fan of the science of shame, and really being able to notice what are my shame triggers and why, and then how do I deal with them? Because it really isn't possible to just be like, oh, stop being defensive. Okay, well, that's like telling someone to calm down when they're upset. Like, when does that ever work? Like, literally ever. With kids, it never works for you to just tell a kid, like, chill.
That I can actually, it's like putting more fuel on the fire.
100%. So you can't do that to yourself either. And, I had many, many pivotal moments, I think, throughout my life and really my professional career, on both sides. So I spent a good chunk of my early career learning the science of persuasion. So really learning how do you cultivate openness and curiosity from another person in a conversation about something that might be pretty disorienting for them. I worked in the LGBTQ movement for many, many, many years, and I was on the front lines of some of our country's biggest pushes for equality, justice. And I've talked face to face with hundreds, maybe thousands of people who said to my face, I don't think that gay people should get married. Like, I don't think it's right to be transgender. I don't think transgender people should be protected from discrimination. I've had so many of those conversations. I may be at the Malcolm Gladwell, like 10,000 hours of mastery around that. But really, from that side and trying to help build empathy with somebody else, it really is about asking open-ended questions, being really willing to connect and see the overlap. I'm a nerd, and so I always think about Venn diagrams. Mm-hmm. So I'm like always listening for and mapping, like, who is this person? What are their values? What makes them tick? What are their passions? What do they care about? What do they love? What do they fear? And then where's the overlap with me? And then that's the space where we live, is in that overlap. And then I tell my story through that lens so that they can see the connective tissue between the two of us who feel so different. We're not actually that different. There are so many parts where we overlap. And so that's sort of where I try to live there. And then being really super aware of my own healing, like you mentioned, the trauma, being really aware that when somebody says something, how do I manage myself? If somebody says something negative about me or my people or my life or my kids or whatever, how do I how do I identify? How do I bring the self-awareness? Oh, that's hitting me in a certain spot. I'm going to put a pin in that and deal with it later, stay connected in this moment because I have a job to do. My job is to end homophobia. My job is to end transphobia. Eventually, my job became to end racism. You know, I ended up doing a ton of work, specifically working with white people and ending racism. And so, you know, my personal feeling doesn't matter right now. I have a job to do. And then when that's done, I can go back and say, okay, so I had a bodily reaction to that. You know, my limbic system, my amygdala, you know, was really triggered by this. It was really engaged. I wonder why. And then doing that sort of deep work. And then, you know, that's what it becomes on the other side. That's what I learned as I deepened my own training on anti-racism work and dealing with internalized racism and white supremacy and white dominance and anti-Blackness and all those things. When I became the learner, I ended up using the same skills, but just, you know, on a much deeper level. When I notice that something is, you know, is sort of hitting, I call it getting hooked just for myself. I'm getting hooked. And instead of having that healthy detachment it's so weird. I'm not a Buddhist, but now I'm going to mention Buddhism again. But that that idea.
Wow, this is so weird. I just keep bringing it up. Maybe that's your path.
I don't know. But it is that, you know, you have that healthy detachment. You don't let yourself get hooked. Instead, you just put a pin in it and say, I want to get curious for myself. Where does that come from? Where do I have healing to do? And then to do that work to get that healing and to find other people who are on those similar journeys to help you figure out where that's coming from.
I love that. It is definitely lifelong learning, right? People think, oh, I'm going to take this course. I'm going to implement this. I'm going to meditate for 30 days. I'm going to drink my water. Yeah, it's a commitment, and you have to it's layers and layers and layers and layers. So it's really easy for me, Trystan, to not have to go there as a white cisgendered woman. It's really easy for me to stand in my privilege and to live in my little bubble. And, you know, I have to constantly open that door and to lean in and to go in and to get, as you say, hooked and feel into that. And it's a conscious decision that I have to make to step into that room and to go, this is uncomfortable. What do you say to somebody who says, I don't know where to start to begin to understand?
Yeah, I know the saying in this sort of like anti-racism movement is, you know, white privilege is a hell of a drug. And I really think about that a lot.
It's a good drug.
And I think, you know, there are lots of really like experimental and cutting edge thinkers who think about white privilege and racism even as an addiction. So like there are even like 12-step programs for racism. There are people who are thinking about racism, and especially extreme racism, as actually a diagnosable mental health challenge that has to do with narcissism and has to do with complex PTSD, et cetera. I don't use any of those models per se, but I think whatever is useful in motivating people to do better, that's like what I'm interested in. Not through shame, because we know that in fact shame is toxic to the process of change. Shame is not an effective tool for social justice. It's a weapon in the social justice movement, but it's not an effective tool for change. So I think, you know, when it comes to change and when it comes to like not giving up, not backsliding, you know, I think there are multiple ways of approaching it. And I really do encourage people to sort of map for themselves, what is motivating? And for some people, anger is a clean burning fuel. It is motivating. They want to like trauma scroll through Instagram because that's going to get them to that place where they're like, now I'm going to go out and take action. Okay, that's great. That's whatever is effective in motivating you. For other people, though, that's actually really demoralizing. And they start to get to that place of psychologically, it's called retreat, where you do get so overwhelmed, you get so burdened and weighed down with all this information that you're like, I actually am disempowered. I actually can't do anything.
Yeah, you get like,
and then
numb.
They end up stewing, or numbness is one of the symptoms of retreat. Yeah. And that's also not helpful either. And so I think it's just a matter of figuring out what is motivating to me. Is it anger? That's great. if, is it hope? Is it joy? Is it empowerment? Is it working, is it accountability? There's a lot of, I've been doing white accountability groups for about 10 years, leading white accountability groups for about 10 years. And like for a lot of people, that's what they want. They want an opportunity to be with a community of people where they're making a commitment together, and they're really holding themselves accountable. And so I think there's no one right way to do it. I would say for someone who is in where you're describing, what I recommend, that stage of, I'm sort of like, I put my toe in the water. It feels scary. It doesn't feel good. So I'm like, this is safer over here, but also I want to do better and be a better person. I really do think that social media is a wonderful place to start to expose yourself to multiple points of entry into the Black Lives Matter movement or into the trans justice movement, and to really start to follow a lot of different types of influencers and activists and artists so that you can start to broaden your scope. Because what can happen is you'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to donate money to, I don't know, Black Lives Matter, California, whatever. And so you do that and you're like, okay, great. I'm taking a first step. Like I'm putting my money where my mouth is. You go on social media and somehow like the goblins of Instagram know that you did that. And then you see like 24 posts about how you shouldn't be donating to Black Lives Matter, California. And you're like, oh my God, I've done the wrong thing. And then 20 more posts that are like, actually, you shouldn't be donating any money. Like, how dare you as a white person try to just like throw money at a problem and not actually make a big change. And you're like, oh crap, I've done the wrong thing. And then you spiral, you get back into the retreat place.
Yeah.
And so it's really about finding multiple points of entry, multiple different points of view, because of course, like, look at the way that women think about feminism and sexism. Huge levels of divergence. Like I mean, Melania Trump probably thinks that she's a feminist. Certainly J.K. Rowling thinks that she's a feminist. But you wouldn't want someone to just follow one of them and be like, well, I guess that's feminism. No. And it's the same thing with racial justice. Just because one person of color has an opinion doesn't mean it is the opinion or that you have to believe it or you have to follow what they say. You need multiple points of entry, multiple different voices, so you can start to develop your own nuanced analysis of where you fit. What is your role? What are you called to do? What's your unique sphere of influence? What's your unique genius? And you can do that. And maybe that's about parenting. Guess what? Like, racism shows up in home. It shows up in schools. It shows up in art. It shows up in culture. It shows up in business. Wherever your unique sphere of influence is, you can spend your whole life literally right there, and that work will matter, and that work will be transformative, and that work will be powerful, and it will be more fulfilling for you than if you try to do something that doesn't feel right to you. You can go to a million marches, and if you have social anxiety and that's paralyzing to you, what good did you do?
Yeah.
If you're an artist, don't go to marches. If you have social anxiety, make art that can start to change the cultural context, and that's fulfilling for you. Do you know what I mean? And I do a lot of anti-racism coaching, and I see this a lot with my clients. They get into this place of like, the shame, the guilt, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing the right, blah, blah, blah. It's hard.
It's hard. It's uncomfortable, but I'm seeing this overlap of commitment, conviction, devotion to just keep dipping your toe in the water, and that there is no right or wrong. It is what is. And as long as all stupid sayings you hear, like feel forward, blah, 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 create that forward momentum of, there's a lot of people who have this all or nothing personality. I'm one of them, and I'm learning to manage it. Self-awareness, right? So self-awareness where it's like, I'll go to the couch to marathon next day. And it's like, how about I just like get off the couch, put my shoes on, and like, that's enough. Like, read that book, and you don't need external validation that you've read that book or that you have had that conversation. Be curious. And that's really what I love about this conversation. And whether it is anti-racism work, inclusion, equity, parenting, right? Like humanity, humility, having this, it's just these little baby steps. And the more conversations I have, the more quote unquote work I do on myself, you realize it's all connected. It's all connected. I'm so curious about stepping into this space. I wanted to ask you, like, at what age did you feel this calling? Like, if you talk to your younger self, would you know that you're doing what you're doing today? Like, I want to know how you fell into this and also how that's made you a better parent
Yeah, I
or
mean,
shifted your parenting.
yeah, well, I mean, just to, I think to put a sort of bow on the last topic, although I appreciate the transition, is, I think a couple of things come up when it has to do with like, oh, the baby steps thing or whatever. I think it's so important that we understand that we're having this conversation in like in the context of cancel culture. And so it's almost like, to take your couch to marathon analogy, it's almost like people who are sitting on the couch are being shamed for not running a marathon. Then they try to run a marathon and they don't win. And people are like, how dare you not win? Or you try to run a marathon without training and you break your ankle. Yeah, like that's the analogy we're talking about, is like white people are really like wanting to catapult themselves into marathon status to be able to like do and be anti-racist like that. It's not, it is training, like you said, but like you also have to try, like you have to do the laps, you have to put in the work. And just like running a marathon, I say like it's head, it's heart, it's hands. Like you have to understand how your body works. You have to understand the science of like, how do you work up to a marathon? When do you need to hydrate? What kind of nutrition do you need? Similarly, people need to read the books. They need to know the history, but like, that's not enough. It's not enough. You have to do the heart stuff. You have to really dig deep and mine for, I mean, I call it the archaeologist, which is like a tool that I invented for really digging deep into where do I still hold racist beliefs, and you pull that out and you really look at it like an archaeologist might. So then you can Marie Kondo it, you can be like, thank you for what you've taught me, I release you. And then you actually have to do the work. You have to do the hands, like you have to take action at a pace where you're not going to break your ankle, but you are training. You do have to try, but it's in this context of cancel culture where the stakes feel extraordinarily high. If you do the wrong thing and you are publicly shamed, like you can lose your job, you can lose friends if you do this work inartfully. And so I do encourage people to have grace, to try and to fail and to keep trying, and to manage your own white culture stuff around perfection and black and white thinking, either or, right or wrong. And then, the layer on that is the trauma, is to know that if and when someone comes to you directly or indirectly and says, like, you didn't do this the way that I wanted you to, sometimes that's going to be real for them, but not arbitrarily true. And that's where, that's the sort of that's the like university level. That's a 201 version of being able to look and see. It's sort of like, if a man holds the door open for a woman and she's like, how fucking dare you? That's sexist. Okay. Is it? I don't know. She's having a certain reaction that is likely more about the experiences that she's had with men. We have to sort of use our empathy and our experiences of marginalization and think, where might this be coming from? Where have I experienced this? So anyways,
I really appreciate that. I appreciate that. And like you said, you can't just read and be like, okay, I'm good. Go deeper, go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. And we got to do the inner work.
Yeah. So to get to your next question, which was, yes, I feel like I have always been like this. And the earliest memory that I can think of is in middle school, when they, at the last minute, changed the curriculum so that you would have to dissect frogs in order to graduate from like whatever 7th grade biology. So it must have been like 11 or 12. And I was a vegetarian already at that point, which was I had made that choice myself. I was not raised in a vegetarian family. And so, I told the principal, like, I didn't think that this was right. And he was like, yeah, sorry. I went to the superintendent and I was like, I don't think this is right. And he was like, yeah, sorry. And so I contacted PETA and they helped. And this is like, okay, I was born in 82. So we're literally talking about like the early 90s.
Wow.
And so, PETA was like, yeah, that's illegal. It's against California law. They can't do that. And I was like, okay, well, they are. What do I do? And so I decided that I was going to do a picket in front of the school, like stage a walkout. God knows where I got that idea from. but my parents like helped me make the signs, and my mom like went to Michael's and got puff paint for me. And I staged a walkout. I got, and so like and I called the newspapers and the TV stations, and they changed the curriculum. The superintendent called my house and was like, call off and, tell the newspapers to stop calling me, and we'll let you do something else. And I was like, that's not enough. You have to let other kids do something else too if they want. And he was like, okay. And so even at that early age, I learned that no matter how small your voice is, if you understand the levers of power, you can make a lasting impact. And I'm just so privileged that my parents, who are like, not like, my mom was raised on a farm. My grandpa on my dad's side was a coal miner. It's not like we come from labor organizers or whatever, but they always just felt like if our kid has a passion, the best thing we can do is to support them and then get out of the way. And I think that's how they approached my whole entire, I think even today, I'm still very close to my parents. And I think even today they're sort of like, what do you need? And like, go team, not trying to really shape, but more guide. And if you'd asked me at 18, what did I want to grow up to be? Like, I 100% would have said I want to be a professional pissed off queer. And everyone would have told me there's no possible way you can do that. And now I'm living the dream at almost age 38.
Living the dream. But are you pissed off or are you empowered?
I mean, I think both. I mentioned, one of my favorite phrases, especially early in my professional and personal development, was, I think when I was like 19 or 20, I went to see a very famous trans icon and historian who's since passed away, Leslie Feinberg, speak. And Leslie said, anger is a clean burning fuel. And that just really stuck with me. And I'm to a point now where I think, anger is not something that motivates me anymore. When I feel angry, my immediate reaction now is to go deeper. What's under it? Is it a, loss, grief, sense of mourning, disappointment, loss of connection, fear? What's under it? But I still, I think there's nothing wrong with being angry. I think it can motivate really powerful change. I've just learned myself to have that as like, I just tell myself to have that. That's like a color in the palette,
Yeah.
It's just not the only color. And then I think, I try to imagine creating something that has all the things. There's some anger in it. There's some grief. There's some desire for connection. There's all the stuff.
I love that. Anger has motivated me very greatly in my life. It's got me off the bathroom floor a few times. Do you remember like your first into personal development? Like, I know there was that activism, but what was that first into personal development for you?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Again, it's about privilege and just like the randomness, or some people would say like synchronicitousness. I don't know, whatever. The like synchrony of the universe would, it's just the circuitous path that you look back on and you're like, well, that was totally random, but like, oh my God, it really, those stars aligned. Yeah. But like my original professional training is in performing arts. And so I was in the original Los Angeles cast of this rock musical called Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And from there, I got an email from a fan who was like, I came to see your show, think you're super cute, want to go on a date with me? And I was like, sure. It was a different time,
Sure.
This is literally like 15 years ago, all right? But I was like, sure, let's meet in a public place, whatever. He was super sweet. We dated for like 6 months. His best friend worked at the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. When I was a professional actor, I wanted to do more sort of activism-y things. I was like, you do something, my like boyfriend's best friend got into doing community organizing from there. And it was at that organization where, with like nearly zero experience, I got an organizing fellowship. They were looking to invest in the trans community to do lifelong organizing and systems change work. And so like, I think I was tokenized into that position. Cool, fine, whatever, I'll take it. And I ended up staying and working there for 7.5 years. And there they really invested in the personal development stuff. So we did the Enneagram. They sent me to like multiple professional trainings on anti-racist facilitation, curriculum design, space holding, courageous conversations. I think what they weren't able to give me in salary, they were able to give me in professional development funds. And I said yes. I said yes to everything. And when I heard no, I found another way in. So if I said, I want to do this leadership development training, everyone says it's the best. If the task force said, no, we can't afford to send you, I just reached out to that company. I was like, hey, I'm a young transgender man wanting to do this work. I said, I got to know, what can you offer me? And they're like, oh, we'll give you a scholarship.
I love it.
Or they're like, well, if you fundraise half the money, we can, we'll waive the other half. Okay. So whatever. And so from there, I was able to do all that sort of like deep personal development stuff to figure out my own stuff, to get to a level of emotional maturity, all of those things. Because I didn't go to college. I tested out of high school. So I'm basically a high school dropout. I am a college dropout, but just like saying yes and proactively looking for those chances to just be a better person.
Best education ever. Saying yes and proactively looking for opportunities to be a better person.
Literally Google.
That's all I want. That's all I want for my children. That's all I'm like, I don't care what degrees you have on the wall. Like, how do you feel in your heart, in your soul, and in your body? And are you good to other people? And do you have the emotional development skills that when someone projects something onto you, it doesn't seep in and stay there?
Yeah. You're like, useful feedback. Thank you so much. Not useful feedback. No thanks. Okay, a little bit of that is true, but some of that is just your shit. So that I'm just going to get back to you. Yeah, the sort of like refinement thing. So yeah.
I have one final question for you. I feel like we could talk forever, but I am going to be mindful of time. How do you want your children to remember you?
Yeah, I mean, I want them to know that when I was with them, I was present, I was joyful, I was humble, I said sorry a lot. I guided them with love and connection and compassion, and that we made awesome memories. And I want them to know that when I wasn't with them, it was because I was preparing the world for them.
Oh, that last sentence. What do you want the world to remember?
Don't know. Don't care.
Love it. Oh,
I'm not responsible for that. You just plant the seed, you're Johnny Appleseed. You plant the seed and you just keep moving.
I love that. Yes. Oh, so good. So where can everyone find you? What are you up to? All of that magic.
Yeah, well, my professional work, I quit my day job this year.
Congratulations.
Oh my God, thank you. It's been amazing. I had some conversation this week to get certified as a certified LGBT owned company. And the woman was like, oh, you quit your day job in a pandemic. How's that going? And I was like, actually, it's awesome. Turns out I am a great boss to myself.
Yes.
And so my professional life, I lead Collaborate Consulting, and we do all kinds of this kind of work, building better humans, building better workplaces. I do anti-racism coaching one-on-one, which I really love, helping people synthesize the head stuff to the heart stuff to the hands. And building trainings and workshops and leading whole companies, whole teams through a process of better engagement. And then just if you want to see some baby pictures, my partner's name is Biff. And so our sort of online life is we are Biff and I, BIFFANDI, on both Instagram and Facebook. And so that's where we do a lot of our our baby stuff and our parenting stuff. That's where I do my little short, however I can tell a story in as many characters as I get on Instagram. I don't even know what it is, but it's always telling them over the limit. And I'm like, okay, that's good. It's good practice to get more succinct, you know?
You're like, get to the point. You're like more in the comments, more in the comments.
I can't do that because I don't look at comments at all on anybody's posts and not on mine either. It's not good for my own mental health.
Good.
So I just don't do it. So I have to try and distill the whole story down.
Well, you know what? That's such a really good life communication skill, right? What are we trying to say? And just get to the point. When we can say it clear and concise, we can make a bigger impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trystan, you have a book coming out. I know there's not a lot of information about it yet, but when's that coming out?
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird. I was trying to find like the page on my publisher's website so I could send a link to somewhere. And like, you can pre-order it today on Amazon, which I had no idea that was possible. So I don't know. And I don't want to be like, I don't want people that hate Amazon to come from me, but I don't know. I don't think there's anywhere else you can pre-order it right now. But it's called How We Do Family by me. So yeah.
How We Do Family?
Yep. How We Do Family.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm going to post the links in the show notes for that and where we can find you. I really appreciate your time, your energy, and just you showing up in the world as you are. You are a beautiful example of the more you invest in yourself, the impact you can make not only in your home, but in everyone else who gets to experience you. So thank you.